Hey guys, we're here at EA Play checking out Star Wars Battlefront 2, and I've got quite the motley crew here, if I may. A bunch of fine folks here working on the game, and actually, you guys represent each of the three studios, and that is a
we do.
That is a historic sort of collaboration on such a large title. So really exciting, and wanted to kind of start off with Battlefront 1, great game, came out a couple of years ago, and what were the discussions that led to Battlefront 2?
So, I was fortunate enough to work with Battlefront 1 and also with the Year Season Pass, and we discovered a lot of incredible things. Like, we knew we made a great game. We knew that people really loved what we did. We managed to transport players to a Star Wars location that they'd always dreamed of going to. You know, when you watched I'm really talking about Walker Assault on Hoth. This was probably our crown jewel of our game. And people had always wanted to experience that battle. They always wanted to step foot on Hoth in a way that they can't do through the movies. And we, through our entertainment, managed to do that. What we wanted to do with Battlefront 2 is we didn't just want to replicate a game mode like Walker Assault across multiple planets. We really wanted to create, every time you went to a planet, you would invoke the nature of it and the spirit of it. And that's what we do with our signature mode of Galactic Assault. So here we have Theed, one of our battles in Naboo, and what we're doing here is that separatist army who's attacking. The invasion is what you know from the films, is what you emotionally attach to. So we managed to create this incredible experience where we not only put you into this location as part of the separatist army invading or a clone army defending, but also really invoke that DICE sandbox of multiplayer, vehicle play, aerial, ground, all the different troopers, and really just bring it to another level.
And single player for the first time. It must have been a big moment for you guys.
Yeah, Battlefront had single-player content, but it didn't have story. And I think story is what, understandably, a lot of Star Wars fans were looking for from Battlefront, and so that's why we're bringing the campaign.
Yeah, and I think the first game was the first step. Star Wars means so many different things to so many different people. I think that the thing that excites me is, the first game was the original trilogy, and now we get to broaden it and deepen it. And really give players a range of experiences that I think they're really going to connect with through their love of Star Wars and the types of gameplay experiences that we're going to offer, whether it's in a single-player story or in multiplayer trooper combat or in space or together in co-op.
That's awesome. What we've got here too, and I don't want to sort of downplay this, is we've got really three world-class studios, and we've just never seen anything quite like this. So we've got DICE, we've got Criterion, then we've got EA Motive working on single-player and story, and it's historic. What brought these three studios together and kind of this unprecedented collaboration?
I think first of all, it's the opportunity. We want to bring the lot, and I think in something like Star Wars, Battlefront, you need to bring these centers of excellences together. You've got the experts in, decades worth of experience in making multiplayer experiences. You've got these guys that have come forward and, building a new studio with that expertise in narrative and character action. And my home studio at Criterion, we had a little bit we did the speeder bike in Battlefront 1, and we know vehicles deeply, and I think that we wanted to express that, speed and the game feel of not just the vehicles, but the other parts of the games that we get to work on. So really it's this, tight collaboration that represents three, significant studios coming together. And
hundreds and hundreds of people are working on this game. That's a fact. Is it fair to say this is EA's maybe biggest game that they've ever created?
I think it certainly feels the most ambitious.
Sure.
In terms of the sort of the amount of things to play with, and the breaking of new ground in particular areas. It certainly feels like that to me.
So what was the player feedback to the original Battlefront, Star Wars Battlefront? What was the player feedback? Was it what did you hear from the front lines from people who were playing online?
So what we really heard was, we loved the experience. It was great that you managed to transport us to these locations, but we really we wanted more breadth. A lot of people found that with the original Battlefront, after a few months of play, they lacked those long-term goals. And so these are the things that we're really trying to make sure that we nail in this new game of Battlefront 2. So our locations, we span across all 3 eras, the prequel, the classic, and the new. And we also add that depth through our card and progression system.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I got a chance to play here at EA Play, and yeah, remarkable sort of the evolution of the gameplay and all the new character classes and how they kind of interact with each other. So kind of curious, like what are some of the things, I only got maybe 20 minutes, half hour with it, and I was dying to play more. What are some of the things that players are going to be able to do to progress and customize their characters in the final game?
It's all about just personalizing your characters, making them feel unique to yourself. So as you progress through the game, you will earn cards, you'll craft cards, you can purchase crates with credits that you earn from your gameplay experiences. And this will help to branch out across, instead of in just a linear way, in multiple fashions. So each of our heroes and each of our troopers have 9 different cards, which will modify not only your abilities, but also give you new abilities. They have different rarities, so we now have 4 different rarities with which they become more powerful as you evolve over time. So as I play with my Darth Maul, and I might play Mark here, he might play with a completely different Darth Maul because he's placed a different focus. So you really get to put your own personality into these characters.
And you make a great point there about, you mentioned Darth Maul, the heroes and the villains. I mean, this is a huge part of Star Wars, and it was a huge draw for the original Battlefront. So here we are with Battlefront 2, and I know based on the announce, they're going to play an even bigger role in this game.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our hero characters are really the pinnacle of the multiplayer experience. Every positive action that you make within the game, whether it's supporting your fellow troops, whether it's playing the objective, eliminating enemies, you will earn these points. And you can either choose to collect them and keep them built up so that you can become a hero in a little while, or you can make tactical choices, and this is where player choice really comes to the forefront.
Interestingly, that hero concept actually translates to the vehicles as well. So tell me a little bit about how you guys are thinking about that at Criterion.
As Craig says, you can customize your troopers and your heroes, but also the starfighters as well. And that forms a significant part of this game. We knew that players wanted to go into space and have these epic starfighter moments. We're going to be able to give that to the players, but also obviously vehicles that have a role on the Battlefront as well. So it's the same really with the core combat, the starting point of how we wanted to change the vehicles in that. So the core combat is actually evolved significantly from the first game. There's way more opportunity for players to, just through the gun experience, to develop more skill. They can customize their weapons as well. But in terms of the vehicles, we wanted to bring that same vision to that. So to allow players that, as our starting point will always be make them accessible, but also have the depth so players can have control mastery in there. So when they get to play in the single player, they can experience is not just trooper combat, but starfighter combat, and those skills are highly transferable back into multiplayer. So it's really, it's the 3 teams working together, those systems and the way in which they interact, developing skills for players to be able to transfer throughout the game.
Mark, that's a great point. So I actually got a chance to check out a brief segment from the single player, very brief demo, very impressive, I've got to tell you. Running on PS4 Pro looked spectacular, visually just incredible. I was immediately struck by the fact that, that just the pacing of the game, like I'm watching really tight cinematics that are really feeling like a legitimate Star Wars movie, and then I'm vaulting into a TIE fighter into this like really epic space battle. I mean, tell me about like exploring the universe, kind of an untold chapter in the Star Wars universe.
And so, yeah, I mean, when we set out, it really was, we had those 2 things. We had 2 goals. It was make sure that we understand and retain the spirit of Battlefront multiplayer, because we want to create a story that is still true to Battlefront. And so that's why we started with the soldier, because Battlefront it's about being a soldier on the front lines of combat in these epic fights in the Star Wars universe. It's about being an ace pilot in a starfighter in the skies, and it's also about being a hero. And so we kind of merged those 3 fantasies because we wanted to keep those 3 fantasies alive throughout the game with interesting pacing. And that's where we landed with Imperial Special Forces, because you can be a trooper on the ground, you can be a pilot in the skies, and you also become a hero. I mean, because the overriding theme of the game, I guess, is that anyone can become a hero. Anyone in Star Wars, whether you're a trooper, whether you're a starfighter, you can advance through the game, through Battlefront, and become a hero. And so you get to play Iden Versio becoming a hero.
you're kind of taking a lot of the stuff that these folks are working on, and you're kind of pulling it into this awesome narrative. What was the strategy for you to come at that and to kind of tell that story properly?
It was really just collaborating with Lucasfilm. So we sat down with them very early on, and just, before we pitched them a whole bunch of story ideas, we just sat down and had kind of just fun, creative discussions. Like, we love Star Wars. You guys obviously love Star Wars. Like, what kind of stories do you want to tell? Asking them what they thought Battlefront was, right? Because they know everything in Star Wars. Star Wars isn't just one franchise or one idea, right? They have this idea that each part of Star Wars needs to have its own storytelling kind of style and tone and idea, and kind of, so that you can recognize something as, say, Battlefront, or recognize it as Rebels. And so, we talked early on, like, what do you think Battlefront is about, and how should we tell these stories? How should somebody be able to look at a piece of content and immediately understand that this is a Battlefront story rather than any other kind of story? And so the time period that they were really interested in was that kind of that 30 years that was suddenly kind of created by putting The Force Awakens at this point in Star Wars history.
I want to pivot over here to Craig. That concept of like exploring the Star Wars universe with like a new perspective. One of the things that struck me is in multiplayer, there are these character classes. So that's kind of a new concept for Battlefront 2. One of them is the Officer, which I was intrigued to see. And it's a character you kind of see scurrying in the background in some of the original trilogy. What's the strategy for taking what might be considered almost a background character and blowing it out into a full-featured multiplayer class?
Yeah, so we have our new class systems. We have 4 classes. We have our Assault, our Heavy, our Specialist, and our Officer. And the important thing for us was to make sure that they invoke the spirit of those characters. So as you mentioned about the Officer, what do I expect from an Officer? What would I want to see on the battlefield when that happens? And I want to see someone who commands, who leads the line, who people will stick to and form, a team or a squad. I want someone, and so we have abilities such as the Battle Command, which helps to buff your players around you and give them more health. They can also lay down turrets, so they also have power within them. And we create amazing synergies between these classes. So if I were to mention the other classes, our Assault, someone who's very good at close combat, leading the front line, helping to break through those defenses. A Heavy, who is great at defensive, holding strategic positions. And the Specialist, someone who plays at range, primarily taking those expert shots and saving my back anyway a number of times. And what we find is we've built in a lot more team play, and these classes really allow us to do that. So we have these incredible moments where groups of players spawn together, stick together, and really can make a difference. So
tell me a little bit about, I know space battles. We're not going to get too much into that just yet. Was space battles, was that something fans were requesting from you following Battlefront 2? Or
yeah.
Battlefront 1, rather?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I think we had Fighter Squadron in the first game, but I think the fantasy of those moments that you remember from, particularly for me, it's in Return of the Jedi, is, on the Assault and Second Death Star, yeah, just seeing these epic capital ships and the starfighters in battle. It's that's a shared fantasy we think across the many people have, and we wanted to extend, and so that's really where we're going. Really giving players that opportunity to be a badass pilot and to be heroic in their starfighters. And so we'll have more to show on that in the coming months. But it's a significant undertaking, and I think people are going to love it.
If the single player stuff I saw is any indication of what we can expect in multiplayer. Woo!
It is. Yeah.
It is. That was a knockout. I also wanted to talk a little bit about sort of this concept of live, being a live game, a game that's going to continue to get updated over time. So what's the strategy for that? I mean, what is Battlefront 2 going to look like post-launch, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months? Is it DLC packs? I mean, how does that all work?
Yeah, so we're actually taking a different approach this time. So previously we used the season pass model, and we got a lot of great feedback from our fans. And what we learned is that we have a slightly different community than traditional shooter games. We have a wider community. Everyone, there's so many people who love Star Wars, and there are people who play our game not necessarily because it's a shooter, but because it's Star Wars. And so for us, we've decided to embark down a model of seasons, and these are free seasons that are themed around content drops. We'll look to keep the community together because that's really important to us. And our first one is actually coming almost straight after launch, which is tied into the Last Jedi movie. So you'll see, so we'll start to see characters like Finn and Phasma come in. We'll see a new planet of Crate that you'll see in this movie. There's just so much exciting stuff. And the great thing that we can do with these seasons is that the universe is so big, and we can start theming these timelines in different areas within the universe, and really start to branch out and expand this universe within our game.
A big advantage to having all 3 film eras in this game.
Absolutely. So I mean, this is the first game that's had all 3 eras. Our goal here really is to create the essential Star Wars shooter. That is absolutely our goal. And when you think about all of the eras, when you think about the single player, you think about the space, classes, all these vehicles. There is so much there. I don't see how any shooter fan or any Star Wars fan would not want to be a part of this.
I think I'm continuing to understand why it took 3 studios to make a game like this. So let's talk a little bit more about that single player demo I just saw. It was running on PS4, visually spectacular. I was extremely impressed by that. And I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the variety that we were seeing there. And I think that was, I wasn't quite sure what to expect actually when I heard there was going to be a campaign in Battlefront 2. Unorthodox choices, if I might add. I mean, having Iden, who is a member of the Empire, not a perspective we're accustomed to sort of seeing Star Wars stories from necessarily, and having Iden be the protagonist I think is really interesting. We just get to see a bit of a different side of the Empire.
Yeah, I mean, it comes back to those first conversations we had with Lucasfilm about, how do we tell a Battlefront story versus any other Star Wars story. And the roads all led us to being a soldier, and again being special forces, somebody who could, because we want the gameplay to be kind of a taster menu, almost like a chef's table of what Battlefront can provide, right? Because we want to attract maybe some new fans or fans of Battlefront who they want to learn everything to do with multiplayer or starfighters in a less threatening offline environment. And so we need to make sure that our systems and the core gameplay is true to what's happening in multiplayer, so that the hours you invest in the campaign, suddenly when you go across to multiplayer, the guns handle, it's the same you run at the same speed, you jump at the same heights, you take the same kind of damage, and when you're in a starfighter it handles the same. So all of that knowledge is transferable across. And we get the chance to take all of those ingredients, because it's a massive game across all 3 eras. We take all of those ingredients and we just have to make this kind of curated adventure that takes you through Star Wars universe, but also through all of the different elements of Battlefront multiplayer.
And also just fleshing out that universe even more, right? Making it even more fun to play. You're giving me chills. So almost out of time. Wanted to ask each of you, personally speaking, Craig, let's start with you. What are you most proud of with this game? And by all means, feel free to give your comrades here some love as well. It doesn't have to just be about multiplayer.
So what am I most proud of? I think it's just be able to realize an ambition that I never thought that I would be a part of. I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I've been making games for a long time. Never before did I think I would be a part of a Star Wars game that could have the depth and the complexity of the multiplayer and that sandbox that DICE is so known for. Marry that with a single player story told from a different side. It's phenomenal. Like, the ambition here that we've managed to achieve is something that I never thought would be able to be realized when I worked in games. So I'm just incredibly proud of that.
All of it, yeah. That's a great answer.
A lot. Thanks for leaving something for the rest of it.
Yeah,
that's all of it.
What about you, Matt? What about you?
I think we share a similar perspective. This is the sort of thing that really energizes you, and it's huge and it's scary, but it's the talent within each of these teams that really is shining through. And it's when you get to come and do these sorts of events that it's the first time you get to see sort of like this other perspective of people who haven't seen this stuff before, that is really energizing. I'm just so proud of what all of the teams across all the studios have been able to bring together.
Finally, Mark, what are you most proud of here?
Well, there's nothing left. I like the poster.
Poster's good. It's a great poster. No question about it.
No, I think seeing it outside, hand painted, is absolutely incredible. For me, I think it's. As someone who comes from a game design background, I'm a huge fan of the confluence between data and creativity. What's been incredible about this project is seeing and this is my first time making a game with EA, is just seeing how data is embraced and how listening to player feedback and listening and looking at what players actually do in the game, and marrying that with creative ideas about where we want to take the game in the future, and looking at what people do in a whole year of live service, and really looking at the data and looking at the way that people respond to the game and the piece of software when it's alive and out there, and looking towards the future, and marrying that with creative ideas. I think that's been a fascinating experience for me.
Well, give me an example of that, like how data or analytics kind of might influence your design perspective.
Well, it's just things like the amount of time that people spend when people spend playing heroes versus villains, for example, as a game mode in Battlefront. It was kind of a surprise, I think, to the DICE team, just how popular that game mode was.
It was my favorite for sure, no question. Yeah.
And that starts to influence how much focus that we want to place on heroes as characters. And we saw that in the single player campaign and how much playtime was being spent in the heroes versus villains game mode, and seeing all of the user research about what people wanted from a story. They wanted a new hero. They didn't just want to play as the old heroes, but they wanted an experience that crossed paths with the iconic heroes and iconic locations from Star Wars. And so we rolled that into all of our early thinking about what we could do with the story campaign. And so on Aiden's journey as a brand new hero, you will cross paths with new heroes with iconic heroes from Star Wars that you'll recognize.
And we got a glimpse of Luke Skywalker as one of them.
Well, I'm not going to talk too much about that.
Okay. Okay. Well, we'll let you guys off the hook. This has been a fascinating discussion. Battlefront 2 coming out this November and looking absolutely fantastic on PS4 Pro, I must add.
Yes, it does.
Yes.
Really good. So thank you for joining us. It's been a great treat here checking out Star Wars Battlefront 2.